"Young man," Martinez said with the forced patience of a professional. "The financial guarantee was provided by Mrs. Hughes, personally and privately. She has the legal right to withdraw that guarantee at any time. I now need someone to provide an alternative form of payment immediately, or I will be forced to suspend the event." Juliet approached, stumbling, her wedding dress now completely disheveled and her makeup smeared with tears. "You can't do this," she yelled at Martinez. "It's our wedding day. You can't ruin our wedding day over money problems." Her hysteria was evident, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with increasing discomfort. "Ma'am," Martinez replied with growing firmness, "I am not ruining anything. I am simply following the contractual terms that you signed. If you cannot provide an alternative payment immediately, I will have to ask all guests to leave and suspend all services." His ultimatum fell on the ballroom like a final sentence. The reality of the situation began to penetrate the minds of the guests. Some had already started to grab their bags and discreetly head for the exits. Others remained fascinated by the drama that continued to unfold. Like spectators of a traffic accident they couldn't look away from. "Mom," Ethan said, approaching me with tears in his eyes for the first time since he was a child. "Please, I know what we did was wrong. I know we hurt you, but there are 130 people here. There are photos. There are memories. You can't destroy all this over a fight." His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the little boy he had once been. "Ethan," I replied with a calm that surprised me, "I am not destroying anything. You destroyed this when you chose greed over love, when you chose manipulation over honesty, when you chose to publicly humiliate me, instead of treating me with the respect I deserve as your mother." Each word was like a dagger, but they were words that needed to be said. "But what are we going to do?" Juliet asked in a desperate voice, looking at the guests who continued to leave the ballroom. "How are we going to explain this? How are we going to pay for all of this?" Her panic was evident, and I could see she was finally starting to understand the real implications of her actions. "You're going to do what all responsible people do," I replied. "You're going to find ways to earn money, honestly. You're going to learn to live within your means. You're going to discover what it means to work hard for the things you want, instead of expecting others to provide them for you." My voice had grown stronger, and I could feel decades of accumulated wisdom pouring out through my words. Carlos approached discreetly and murmured, "Mrs. Hughes, the legal process is complete. All documents have been delivered and explained. There is nothing more we can do here." His message was clear. It was time to leave, to let Ethan and Juliet face the consequences of their decisions without my presence as a distraction. Lucy approached once more and hugged me tightly. "Aunt Aurora, I want you to know that you will always have my respect and my love, no matter what happens with Ethan." Her words were like a balm for my wounded heart, reminding me that not all family had been corrupted by greed. "And you will always have mine, Lucy," I replied, returning the hugs. "Remember this night when you make important decisions in your life. Remember that character is defined not by what we have, but by how we treat the people we love." Her tears soaked my shoulder as she nodded, completely understanding the lesson that was unfolding before her eyes. Martinez approached again, this time with greater urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need an immediate resolution. I have other commitments tonight, and I cannot keep staff here indefinitely without a guarantee of payment." His professional patience was finally running out, adding additional pressure to an already desperate situation. "You have my phone number," I said to Ethan and Juliet for the last time. "When you are ready to have a real conversation about respect, values, and responsibility, when you have learned what it means to earn things for yourselves, when you can look me in the eye and offer me a genuine apology for what you did to me tonight, then we can talk. But for that," I added, looking at them directly, "first you will have to find a way to solve the mess you created here, all on your own." With those words, I turned and walked toward the exit with Carlos, leaving behind a ballroom full of chaos, despair, and the harsh reality of deserved consequences. 3 days after the wedding, my apartment had become a refuge of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Joseph had come over every morning with coffee and pastries from the local bakery, making sure I was okay. After what he called the night Aurora reclaimed her dignity, his visits had been a balm for my soul, reminding me that I still had chosen family who valued me for who I truly was. The phone had rung incessantly for these 3 days. Ethan had called 37 times, leaving messages that evolved from initial anger to desperate pleading. Juliet had sent 14 text messages, each more hysterical than the last. Her parents had shown up at my door twice, demanding that I fix the mess I had caused, but I had held my ground with a calmness that surprised even myself. Carlos arrived that morning with news that, while expected, was devastating in its full scope. Mrs. Hughes, he had told me as we drank tea on my balcony, I have received reports from all fronts. Ethan and Juliet were evicted from their apartment yesterday morning. The ballroom has initiated legal proceedings to recover the $53,000 owed. Their credit cards have been cancelled for non-payment. And where are they living now? I had asked, although a part of me already knew the answer. With Juliet's parents, Carlos replied. Apparently, it's a 2-bedroom apartment where 3 people already live. The situation is tense, according to my sources. His expression suggested that tense was a very conservative description of reality. That afternoon, while I was watering my plants on the balcony, I saw a familiar car park in front of the building. It was Lucy, but this time she wasn't alone. With her was Amelia, my old friend from the real estate sector. And to my surprise, Joseph got out of the back seat. "Aura!" Lucy yelled from the sidewalk. "We need to talk to you. There are things you need to know." When they arrived at my apartment, their faces wore a mixture of urgency and concern that immediately put me on alert. "At Aurora," Lucy began, "I've been investigating some things since the wedding night. Things I think you need to know before it's too late." She sat on my couch with a folder in her hands that looked as official as the one Carlos had carried to the ballroom. "Too late for what?" I asked, pouring her some tea while trying to stay calm. Amelia cleared her throat and spoke for the first time. "Aurora, for the last 3 days, I've been doing some digging into Ethan and Juliet's financial situation. What I found goes beyond what any of us imagined. They had been planning this for more than a year," Amelia continued, opening the folder to reveal documents that made me feel sick to my stomach. I found evidence that Juliet had been consulting with lawyers, specializing in mental competency cases for seniors. They had a detailed plan to legally declare you incompetent and gain control over all your properties. Joseph, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward with a grave expression. "Aurora, there's more. That night, after you left the ballroom, I overheard Juliet talking on the phone with someone. She was saying that the old woman had ruined everything, but they still had Plan B." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "Plan B," I repeated, feeling my stomach clench with a mixture of fear and anger. Lucy took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Aunt Aurora, they've been telling everyone you've gone senile, that the scene at the wedding was evidence that you've lost touch with reality. They're building a case for a judge to declare that you can't handle your own affairs." The magnitude of their betrayal expanded before me like an infected wound. It wasn't enough to have publicly humiliated me, to have planned to strip me of my home, to have conspired against me for months. Now they were trying to use my justified response to their cruelty as evidence of mental incompetence. It was a wickedness that surpassed anything I had imagined possible. "But that's not all," Amelia added, her voice trembling. "I've discovered that Juliet has been spreading rumors in the neighborhood about your erratic behavior. She has visited several of your neighbors, suggesting that they should report anything concerning they observe about you." The systematic nature of her defamation campaign left me breathless. Carlos, who had returned for our scheduled meeting, entered the apartment at that moment and found the atmosphere thick with tension. "Mrs. Hughes, I see you've already found out about some of the recent maneuvers." His expression was more serious than I had ever seen it. "I have some additional news that confirms what your friends have discovered. Ethan filed a preliminary petition yesterday," Carlos said, pulling documents from his own folder. "He is requesting that a court evaluate your mental competency based on what he calls irrational behavior and erratic financial decisions. He has provided sworn statements from several witnesses who were present at the wedding." "Sworn statements?" I asked, feeling the anger begin to replace the shock. "What kind of statements?" Carlos consulted his papers before answering. "Statements describing your unjustified emotional outburst against an innocent young couple. Statements characterizing your financial decisions as vengeful and destructive. Statements suggesting that you have lost the ability to make rational decisions." Lucy squeezed my hand tighter. "Aunt Aurora, they've convinced several wedding guests to sign declarations. Most of them don't really understand what was going on that night. They just saw an old woman attacking newlyweds." Her voice contained all the frustration of someone who had seen the truth, but felt powerless to make it prevail. "But we have good news too," Joseph intervened with a smile that contrasted dramatically with the gravity of the situation. "It turns out there are more people on your side than they imagine." He took out his own cell phone and showed me a screen that left me stunned. "Joseph, what is this?" I asked, looking at what appeared to be a social media video with thousands of views. "Aurora, remember that several guests were recording that night? Well, some of those videos have gone viral. People aren't seeing a senile old woman attacking an innocent couple. They're seeing a dignified woman revealing the truth about years of abuse and manipulation." Amelia leaned in to look at the phone too. "Aurora, the comments on these videos are overwhelmingly in your favor. People are praising your courage, your dignity under pressure, your decision to set boundaries. Some are sharing their own stories of family abuse. You've become a symbol of resistance against the exploitation of seniors." Carlos nodded in approval. "This public response will be invaluable if the case goes to court. It's difficult to argue that someone is mentally incompetent when thousands of people are applauding the logic and justice of their actions." His professional smile had returned, suggesting that perhaps the legal battle wouldn't be as one-sided as I had initially feared. "But there's something else you need to know," I said, making a decision I had been considering for the last 3 days. "If Ethan and Juliet want to play this game, if they want to turn this into a public legal battle, then they are going to discover exactly who they're messing with." I stood up and walked to my desk, where I had been preparing my own folder of documents. For these 3 days, I have been in contact with several lawyers specializing in elder abuse. I have been documenting everything. The intimidating visits, the implicit threats, the conspiracy to strip me of my property, even the slap Juliet gave me. I took out photographs of my swollen cheek, taken immediately after the wedding. Medical evidence of the physical assault. If they want war, I continued with a determination I hadn't felt in decades. They will have war, but it will be a war fought on my terms, with my resources, and with the truth on my side. Furthermore, I added with a smile that surprised even myself, I have decided to do something I should have done years ago. I am going to tell my full story publicly. I am going to show the world exactly what happens when greed is disguised as family love. The room filled with a new energy, the energy of people who knew that justice was on their side and that they had the resources to make it prevail. 6 months after that night that divided my life into a before and an after, I found myself sitting in the most important television studio in the city, waiting for the interview to begin that would tell my full story to the entire country. The program, Stories of a Lifetime, had contacted Carlos, After the wedding videos had accumulated more than 2 million views on social media, my story had become a national symbol of resistance against family abuse of seniors. The journalist, Catherine Diaz, a woman respected for her professional integrity, reviewed her notes while the technicians made the final lighting adjustments. "Mrs. Hughes," she said to me with a warm smile, "I want you to know that you have inspired thousands of people with your courage. We have received hundreds of letters from viewers who have lived through similar situations during these 6 months. Many things had changed. The legal case Ethan and Juliet tried to build against me collapsed spectacularly when Carlos presented evidence of their conspiracy to declare me incompetent. Not only did they lose the case, but they were fined for legal frivolity and ordered to pay my attorney fees, which amounted to $45,009. The bankruptcy that followed was swift and devastating. Ethan had lost his job when his employer found out about the public scandal. Juliet had tried to start an image consulting business, but the viral videos had ruined her professional reputation. They were now living in a one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs, working part-time jobs and struggling to pay their accumulated debts. "We are on the air in 5 minutes," the program director announced. I looked at the cameras that would soon broadcast my story to millions of homes, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. At my side was Carlos, who had agreed to appear with me to explain the legal aspects of the case. In the audience were Joseph, Lucy, and Amelia, my pillars of support during these difficult months. The most painful thing about these 6 months had been Ethan's complete silence. After losing the legal case, he had made no attempt to contact me. There were no calls asking for forgiveness, no letters explaining his behavior, no acknowledgement that his actions had been wrong. It was as if he had decided that it was easier to hate me than to face the reality of what he had done. Juliet, on the other hand, had tried to contact me several times. Her messages had evolved from legal threats to desperate pleas for financial help. The last message received just 2 weeks earlier said, "Aurora, I know we made mistakes, but we're family. Ethan is sick with stress, and I'm pregnant. Please, you can't let your grandchild grow up in poverty." The news of the pregnancy had been like a dagger to my heart. I was going to be a grandmother, but my grandchild would grow up in a home filled with resentment toward me. However, I had learned the most difficult lesson of my life. I couldn't save people who didn't want to be saved. Trying to do so only perpetuated their destructive behavior. "Mrs. Hughes, we'll start in 30 seconds, Catherine informed me. I took a deep breath and thought of all the people who had written to me after seeing the videos, telling me their own stories of family abuse, seniors whose children had taken control of their finances, parents emotionally blackmailed by irresponsible adult children, grandparents threatened with not seeing their grandchildren if they didn't provide financial support. We are live in 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera came on, and Catherine began with an introduction. She had rehearsed perfectly. "Good evening and welcome to Stories of a Lifetime. I am Catherine Diaz, and tonight we have with us Aurora Hughes, a 68-year-old woman whose story has shocked the nation and put the issue of family abuse against seniors at the center of a national debate." "Mrs. Hughes," Catherine continued, turning to me, 6 months after the events at your son's wedding, how does it feel to know that your story has inspired so many people?" Her question was direct but compassionate, allowing me to start on my own terms. "I feel grateful," I replied, feeling my voice stabilize as I spoke. "Grateful that something as painful as the loss of my relationship with my son has served to help other people in similar situations. For months, I felt lonely and confused, wondering if I was the one who was wrong. Now I know that what I went through is more common than any of us would like to admit." Catherine nodded and consulted her notes. "Tell us about the years leading up to that night when you started to realize that something wasn't right in your relationship with your son and his fiancée. It was the question I had been waiting for. The opportunity to explain how emotional and financial abuse develops gradually, almost imperceptibly. It started with small things, I explained, remembering those early signs I had ignored out of love. Comments about my age, suggestions that I could no longer take care of myself, subtle pressures for me to make decisions that truly benefited them. Family abuse rarely begins with blows or shouting. It begins with the slow erosion of your self-confidence, with making you question your own reality. Carlos leaned forward to add legal context.